Okay, we're going to look for it. His previous books include From the Good Earth, On Good Land, Fields of Plenty. Ableman lives and farms at the 120-acre Foxglove Farm on Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. So thank you so much. We're very pleased to have you with us today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being with you all. I can't see anyone. I'm not sure what happened here, but that part of my screen has gone blank, but I'm not gonna, yeah, weird. I just have a blank screen. Can you see
If,
me?
yeah, we can see you. If you switch it to gallery view sometimes, it depends on if you want to, you probably want to be showing your slides though. Most
Yeah,
people just
I
have
do.
their cameras off anyhow, so you're
I'm
not
not
going to
gonna
see
worry
much.
about it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Well, thank you so much. When I got the email invitation, I was kind of surprised because I had in the early days of when I was farming in the States, when the USDA was being invited into setting national law for the organic movement, I was one of the handful of people who disagreed with that transition. And it earned me kind of a bad boy status with the Organic Trade Association in the US. Uh, but I think we've all come together since then. It's actually an interesting story, and I would encourage you, rather than looking for the Meryl Streep film about my work in California, look at Mark Kitchell's wonderful film called The Evolution of Organic, which I think is fantastic. It's a little bit California centric, but very interesting. It tells that story. I'm going to kind of go off in a little different direction, I'm guessing, based on what I've read of the earlier program. Tell you a few stories. I'm going to show you a block of slides from around the world, and then tell you a little bit about our work in Vancouver, and leave, I hope, enough time at the end to where we can have a little bit of a conversation with the Q&A. In the early 1970s, I joined a commune in California that was based on agrarian principles. We had 3 different parcels of land totaling some 4,000 acres on which we raised row crops, orchards, operated a complete goat and cow dairy, and produced our own grain and fiber. We supplied our own natural food stores and bakery and juice factory and restaurant, as well as feeding ourselves. We even made our own backpacks, our own shoes, and our own clothing. Now, after only 4 months living in that community, I was given the responsibility of managing the 100-acre pear and apple orchard located in a high desert valley east of Ojai, California. And at the time, this was one of just a handful of commercial orchards in the country that was being farmed organically. So here I was at the age of 18 with no orcharding experience, having never managed anything, directing a crew of 30 people, most of whom were older than I. The orchard had been abandoned for 15 years. The branches between the trees had become so intertwined that you couldn't find the alleys down the middles of the rows. I had a 1930s copy of Modern Fruit Science, a great book, by the way, the journal from the guy who ran the place the year before and gave up in frustration, and a copy of Goethe's famous quote, "Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it," attached to the door of my 20-foot unheated trailer. Now, under most similar situations, I would have probably spent the rest of my life working in a high-rise office building. But there was something that took place down those rows of apple and pear trees, something very different than what has been happening until now in most agricultural fields and orchards in North America. I went to work each day with 30 of my friends, and while we worked, we joked and we talked and we discussed our dreams. We tried out our latest theories and philosophies on each other, speculated on the fate of the earth, and ate our lunch together under the shade of those trees. In the winter, we pruned every day for 4 months straight. In the spring, we thinned fruit. And in the fall, it was a 10-week harvest marathon. It was repetitive work. But at the end of each day, instead of feeling I had been chained to some mind-numbing drudgery, I felt like I had attended an all-day party. The work got done, the orchard thrived, and those apples and pears gained a reputation around the country. And while the cold nights and hot days of that high desert provided ideal growing conditions, I am sure that fruit was equally infused with the energy of that group of people and the pleasure they found in each other and in that land. Now, this was my introduction to agriculture. This community experience has informed all of my agricultural endeavors since. It demonstrated that good food is more than just the confluence of technique and fertile soil, that it is the result of men and women who love their land and who bring great passion to working with it. Now, I left that communal agriculture project and went on to start a wonderful little project north of Santa Barbara, California, which became kind of one of the progenitors of the movement at its time. And I stayed there, farmed that land for 25 years, and then eventually moved 1,200 miles north to British Columbia, where we now farm on Salt Spring Island. But what I want to show you, and I hope I can get these slides to, let's see if we can make this happen. I have to find my screen share piece here. Let's see, where is it? It has vanished. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I can't seem to find the any sign of you or the screen share.
Maybe hit your try hitting your escape button first, and then maybe things will reappear. Might go small and then go big again.
No, all I have is a blank screen. Now I've got your meeting has launched. Don't see your Zoom meeting launched? Let's try that again. Let's see if you guys are there. Sorry about, oh, there we are. Beautiful. Okay. Thank you. Now you should be able to, if all goes well here. Can you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
And then we're gonna. So in 1981, being incredibly curious about what my colleagues were doing around the world, but especially curious about whose shoulders I was standing on in this world of organic agriculture. I think we tend to forget that this is we are just coming in the tail end of a 7,000 year tradition. And so I, every winter during the breaks from my farm in California, I took my camera gear and I went to a different part of the world to explore what had been happening in those communities over those thousands of years. And of course, I started in China, the oldest agricultural tradition in the world. This is in Xiamen, China. And I assume you can see this okay. Still, yes? Okay, I'll keep going. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
looks
good.
Great.
All right, awesome. Hard, you know, I'm used to having a feedback loop. So I went to Peru. I spent a number of months there in places where the fields that farmers were farming on were so steep that farmers have been known to fall out of them. These are terraces that were made by the Inca over 500 years ago. In Sicily, on land that has more rocks than grains of soil, once the breadbasket of Europe, no longer. Uh-oh, what's happening here? Come on now. There we go. Again, back in China. I'm going to breeze through these very quickly. An incredibly sophisticated systems, you know, waterways with growing algae to feed the ducks and multi-cropping using clay pots to protect the new seedlings. Fantastic. Back in Peru, in China again. I'm gonna breeze through these. In northern Thailand, amongst the Karen tribesmen, and many visits to my friends in the upper mesas of Arizona, the Hopi, 5,000 year tradition growing food in the most inhospitable location on the planet without any water. Brilliant system. And back in China and in Africa, where at the time it was women who were really running the food production. The men were pastoralists, but brilliant systems there. This is in Burundi. And in northern Kenya. And in China, I watched two men water a 3-acre field of onions. It was like a well-choreographed dance, brilliant, using these amazing waters. You guys are still with me, I gather, huh?
Yeah, we're here.
Okay, awesome. Kiwicha, amaranth. And in Sicily, again, a farmer's lunch, And then, of course, after finishing exploring those wonderful traditional cultures and what they could share and offer us, I looked closer to home in California. You know, I saw fields in other parts of the world that had been farmed the same way for 4,000 years and were still fertile and productive. But in my own neighborhood, I saw fields that were less than a decade old that had been essentially depleted and destroyed. This is a celery field in Oxnard, California, about a half hour where I was farming all those years. And this is in the Owens Valley, pumping water from 600 feet deep to water alfalfa in an incredibly dry place. The alfalfa then shipped 1,000 miles away. The largest feedlot, the Simplot feedlot in Idaho. Whoa, what happened there? There we go. So that tells you everything there. And of course, the plight of farm workers in the US, the very people whose hands do most of the farm work risk their lives to cross the border illegally to do the work that Americans will no longer do, okay? It's a longer story. A pesticide shop in Peru where I watch people taste for strength. And in the Coachella Valley, I'm joking here, but this is what they would consider precision fertilizing of nitrate fertilizer into a lettuce field. Yeah. And of course, the results of nitrate pollution. Post-harvest cotton field. Does that look like anything that can be farmed or should be farmed or could be in the next 20 years? And then I also looked at the way forward. And these images were made a long time ago, but they're some of the real pioneers of the movement. Richard Harder, sitting on top of his grain bin, one of the great rice growers, even before the Lundbergs. Wonderful Hispanic family, Hilario Alvarez, who came to the US illegally and eventually ended up owning his own farm, employing 100 people. Great story. Oh, no, don't do this to me. Okay, I'm gonna, some urban gardens in New York City and Philadelphia. This is Louis Savier outside of Paris, incredible, supporting 3 families on a, like a half acre of land through some very innovative systems. My friend Joel Salatin on his farm, wonderful cheesemakers. A Black Farmers Cooperative in Illinois. Richard DeWild, a real master farmer in Wisconsin. And Earl Ransom on his dairy farm in Vermont. And I think that is Elliot Coleman. Elliot and I started a number of years ago a group called the Agrarian Elders. And there you have it. Now I'm going to go back to my, are you guys still there? Just tell me you're there.
We're here, we're here.
Amazing. Okay. Now, as you can see, I've had a great and in many ways privileged life. I've worked hard, but like many of us, that work has provided a daily kaleidoscope of feedback. We get to literally see and taste and witness the results of our actions or inactions in our soils, the people we feed, our helpers, the broader environment. I've been able to travel, explore how other cultures are feeding themselves. Pretty amazing. But there is a point for most of us when there's a reckoning and the realization that with privilege comes responsibility. And so a few years farming on the island, I needed to find a way to offer my skills, do some creative outreach, and provide some real support in the world. I just couldn't retreat. So here's a little bit about that story, and this is based on a TEDx talk I gave a few years ago. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the downtown east side neighborhood of Vancouver in BC, also known as the Low Track, ground zero home of the term Skid Row, poorest postal code in the country, highest concentration of intravenous drug use, open prostitution, and drug overdoses in North America. Now, all of this exists in the heart of gleaming steel and glass high-rises, pristine parks, art galleries, and restaurants. And the shiny new Mercedes, Lexuses, and BMWs that ply the streets of what is now considered to be one of the world's most expensive cities. But as Vancouver's prosperity is celebrated, its concentration of poverty and raw desperation endures in the midst of the polished and the preened. Now walk or drive down the streets or back alleys of this neighborhood and you'll likely see someone pirouetting in the middle of the street high on crack, or sprawled on the sidewalk with a needle in their arm. You bear witness to these things and it's difficult to not make judgments. We all have deep-seated prejudices. We look the other way, walk a little faster, close the car window. But what we cannot ignore is that there is a thin line that separates any of us from the life we see on those streets. A divorce, death of a family member, financial crisis, mental illness, an accident, childhood trauma. Any of these things can put us over the edge. The amputee in a wheelchair, the woman soliciting johns on the corner of the street, the junkie sprawled on the sidewalk. Each has a heart and a soul and the desire to participate in the world. So we asked ourselves, how could we offer that opportunity? So 13 years ago, we started on a half-acre parking lot next to a dive hotel with a bunch of wood boxes full of soil and a ragtag crew of 11 people from this neighborhood. No big idea or grand philosophy, no bleeding heart attempt to save anyone. Just the simple idea that planting seeds and growing food, a reason to get out of bed each day, might allow other things to happen as well. We took abandoned and abused land and employed abandoned and abused people. We did what had never been done on this scale before, and we did it with folks that no one ever imagined could accomplish anything. If I didn't have this job, where would I be? Dead, in an alley shooting up, or in the penitentiary? Now that's straight talk from our coworker, Lyle, who's not prone towards dramatic or romantic reflections on a life that's included robbing banks, providing collection services for drug dealers, and surviving a jump off the top of an 18-story building. Well, the job that Lyle is referring to is farming. And not the kind of farming you might think if you close your eyes and think farm. No cows grazing in vast green pastures, no welcoming farmhouse or tractors cultivating. These farms are on parking lots, under bridges, on abandoned urban lots. Now, I've spent 43 years growing organic food commercially. And along the way, I had a sobering revelation. The majority of high quality food I was producing was going to a very narrow segment of the society, those who could afford it. But isn't good food a birthright for everyone? We all have to eat. We all have to eat well, but equally important, we all need something meaningful to do in our lives. So after growing food for the privileged, I felt like it was time to work with those who were not. And not by giving them food, but by giving them the skills and the space to grow it. In the mid-1980s, I started what I called the Center for Urban Agriculture. Supermarkets had pulled out of many low-income urban neighborhoods. Those same neighborhoods had numerous abandoned lots and throngs of people out of work. I had what I thought at the time was a big idea. What if we could convert those abandoned lots into farms to grow jobs and production quantities of food? And I started in Watts in Los Angeles, another neighborhood that is renowned for its incredible poverty. 103rd and Grape, former home of the Watts Health Clinic, burned down during the uprisings in 1965. We removed thousands of pounds of trash and rubble, needles, dead animals, hauled in tractors from the farm I was running an hour and a half north, and employed local youth to help us plant. A noble idea, but if you haven't noticed, my skin is not black or brown, and I'm not from that neighborhood. So while that project was a great success agriculturally and has had an influence to this day, I had to accept what a dangerous thing it is to think you know what other people need. And I had to dig deep and ask myself what it really means to help and how do we do it well. So now 30 years later and 1,200 miles north, with a little bit more life experience, we're farming on parking lots and large containers bursting with salad greens, arugula, spinach, peas, melons, tomatoes, and more. And we call this Soul Food Street Farms. That's S-O-L-E, by the way. Our work is about recovery. One handful of seeds, one bucket of compost, one parking lot at a time. 8 years, 75 people employed over those years, millions of dollars in wages paid, 4+ acres of pavement, thousands of growing boxes, a large urban orchard, well over 25 tons of food produced annually. And based on a study of the project, for every dollar we pay our staff, an estimated $4.25 savings to the healthcare, legal, and social assistance systems. Our staff come together each day on one of 4 different farm sites that are either parking lots or former contaminated brownfields. Now, this is not some sort of volunteer make work program. These are paid jobs on production farms, supplying Vancouver with excellent quality food. Our program includes not just agricultural training, but life skills as well, things like cooking and canning, basic financial literacy, and more. We have a breakfast program, teach people how to drive, provide rain gear when necessary, take them to the hospital, and sometimes pick them up from jail. Now, we're not social workers, addiction experts, or mental health professionals. We are farmers that recognize that the simple act of planting seeds, nurturing plants, harvesting food, and feeding a neighborhood can heal individuals and the world. We have seen in the people we work with how the simplest of solutions can have the most profound impacts. Reflecting on her journey, Donna, who worked with us for the first 4 years of the project, said, "What's the use of being sober if you don't do anything with your sobriety?" And Alan went from crack addict to farm supervisor, all while raising 2 stepkids and managing his own significant health challenges. And Kenny, our first neighborhood farmer, once told me he comes to work on the farms feeling miserable and leaves feeling relief and hope. And I'll never forget planting tomatoes with Kenny our first season when everything was new and a tomato plant was not just one more tomato plant, but something to behold. I don't think he noticed, but I watched Kenny just looking at one of those plants in awe of its fragile nature. And I sensed in that moment that he realized that plant was dependent on him for its survival. And when the first red tomatoes ripened on those plants, all of us came together to sample our work. And I got to watch that crew's expressions as their brains registered something truly amazing, something so new and so real and so beautiful. So working this way, delighting in the world we share, is eye-opening, and still with eyes open on this world, the pain, the poverty, the pull of drugs, it is impossible to not feel a suffering that is likewise common to us all. Rich or poor, sober or not, we all get our share. But we need to recognize the difference between compassion and pity. And I'm not sure the latter has ever provided much relief. Compassion can be as simple as providing living soil for people to put their hands in, the opportunity and training to do good work, and a sense of purpose and belonging. Compassion is transforming forbidding urban hardscapes into living, breathing, biologically dynamic places that not only nourish our bodies, but open our hearts. Nova, a former meth addict and street kid, refers to her soul food tribe as her family. I love that. Nova tells me she bristles when someone refers to one of the farms as a garden or our staff as gardeners. It's a sentiment I would have never expected when we first started, but I totally resonate with it. If you've been out there in the middle of acres of food, whether it's a parking lot or a field, transplanting or cultivating, or it's a market day and there's a truckload to be harvested, you don't exactly think of yourself as a gardener. To have that distinct identity, to think of your work of planting seeds and making lots of food as a profession, not a hobby, and to know that your hands are growing for 100 times your own self is deeply satisfying, especially for the folks we work with. We as farmers, we who represent only 1.5% of the population, are like a bridge to another world. The crowds that converge several times a week at the farmers' markets are seeking something more than just fresh food. They want the stories, why the berries are small this week but so intense in flavor, how we can possibly grow such good food using biology instead of chemistry. They linger and taste and watch us as we work strong and sure with dirty, rough hands and funky clothes and ruddy complexions. They watch us as we jive and joke and pass on recipes and greetings and tales from the land. And I realized that there is a deeper soulful nourishment that our society is desperately longing for, a hunger that cannot be satisfied by simple calories alone. This nourishment cannot be obtained from food that travels an average of 1,300 miles from the field to the plate. It can't be absorbed from a package or from the shelves of the supermarket or from anonymous ingredients floating out of context. It cannot be enhanced or manufactured or engineered. And even the most complex preparations, the most sublime sauces cannot bring to life what is not already there. The kind of nourishment I'm describing is based on relationships, local, biological, interpersonal, ecological. It is the result of understanding connections, knowing the people who grew the food, knowing that their families were paid a living wage, knowing that the land has been well cared for and protected from development, knowing that the food has not been assaulted with an array of chemistry and that its genetic makeup hasn't been messed with. But most importantly, knowing that everyone has a place at the table, equal access to real food, and the opportunity to do something meaningful in their lives. Now, I am wrapping up, but I have to be honest. It's a little weird that I'm the one telling you this story. I mean, the truth is I've always had good food to eat, a roof over my head, loving relationships, beautiful children. I have no idea what it's like to be living in poverty or strung out on opiates or abused as a child. So the real heroes of this story are those in that neighborhood in Vancouver who are wrestling with demons and challenges that many of us could never endure. Now, there's a lot of ain't it awful hand-wringing going on these days, and believe me, I'm contributing to that. But let's remember that for every global crisis, and we are surely in one, for every disaster, for every mean-spirited, narcissistic world leader, for every act of terror or new sign of climate collapse, there are a million stories of hope and possibility. And Soul Food Street Farms is just one of them. So I know you all are doing this, but create those hopeful stories. Seek them out, participate in them, support them. There is so much magic in the world. I experience it every time I witness the miracle of a seed germinating, or on early morning walks when I linger long enough to receive small fleeting gifts, like beads of dew on taut, squeaky cabbages reflecting the light of the world. Or when I remember members of our staff at Soul Food Street Farms like Alan or Cam or Nova, who came to us in the grips of gnawing addiction, but are now highly skilled, productive farmers. We may feel paralyzed when faced with the enormity of our modern dilemma, but we have enormous power in and around the places where we live. So come back home, nurture and nourish every living thing you encounter, and reimagine, replant, and re-inspire your world, one seed, one farm, one meal, one individual at a time. Now, thank you, but I'm not sure how much time we have. I want to leave enough time for some Q&A, but if we have a lot, I could show you just maybe a dozen slides of that project in Vancouver.
Yeah, why don't you do that? We've got
You
time.
want to do that?
Yeah.
Are you guys still there? Did I put you to sleep? Or
No, we're loving it. We're just all so inspired. Everybody's putting in the chat how inspiring you are.
So let me try to find that. There we go. Let's go back to the, this is not my strong point, I can tell you, the digital thing. Oh, good. Let's see what happens here. Ooh. Let's see. Okay. So I'm gonna blast through these if you don't mind, but I think the visuals help. This is the downtown. This is the context, the neighborhood. Okay, and it's important to have this. And sorry for moving fast, but I really do want to hear from you. Whoop. Oh, this is my project in Watts. We started. This was back in the early '80s. 3 acres in a neighborhood. That makes the downtown east side look like Beverly Hills. That we removed about 25 tons of rubble and got the kids in to help us plant. And this is what it looked like after. This is before. That's after. And this is my favorite. I love that image. And then this is Soul Food. Now this is our original site next to the Astoria Hotel, which we no longer farm at. It's Rob and Donna. We used to grow in these little vertical strawberry tunnels we made out of PVC pipe. There's Kenny. Oh, these are, I didn't intend to show this broad amount. That's Cam. Our tunnel houses, 16,000 square feet of tunnel houses. Yep. The orchard before, what it looked like before, and then this is what a daily job, cleaning up needles. That's me planting the first tree. That's 2 years later. And then persimmons in Vancouver. Can you imagine such a thing? Shiro plums. There's the orchard. I'm going to go quicker here because there's too many slides. Chefs that come to pick up. That's Nova, Alan, Kenny. And there's a little broader aerial view. Another aerial view of another site. Mike, Kenny, Lyle, Jesus, and Miranda. And there you have it. Okay. So thank you all so much. I'm honored that you have me. And I hope I didn't, or maybe I don't hope I didn't offend anybody today. That should be my goal.
No, you inspired all of us. Thank you so much, Michael. That was an excellent discussion.
Okay, all the best.